Good afternoon. Hello, I am Sudeshna, and on behalf of the MARG team, a big welcome to all of you. MARG Business Transformation is a 12-year-old company, and we are involved with the leaders to solve organization problems. We are focused on building organization capability, and in our 12-year journey, through training in leadership development, finance, and consulting on people and process, we are associated with these three global brands. ProSci, who are the world leaders in change management and help change land well in all organizations. Emergenetics deals with thinking and behavior attributes and helps an individual and teams to work well. Human synergistics helps us do the culture assessments. Often we are asked the question that what is your forte? Or what do you do best? A tricky one, considering we want to say a lot of things. We would like to answer that as MARG is best equipped to help you apply your learnings to your workplace. Today, at this webinar, you shall see us demonstrate our knowledge on ProSci, emergenetics, and human synergistics and apply it to communication. With that, I shall pass on the mic to Krish. Krish is our director and is the advanced certified instructor for ProSci and helps deploy change management in several companies. He's also the facilitator for emergenetics as well as human synergistics. So with that, over to you, Krish.
Thank you, Sudeshna. I think there are some participants from the last session that we had. I'm sure you guys know the cycle that we try to adhere to during these sessions. These are working sessions. We want to make sure that you actually get something done in these 90 minutes. 91st minute, you got something to show for the 90 minutes that's got spent, right? So that's one thought I'm having. Those of you who saw the loop would remember this comment which said, think of a communication you want to refine, right? So think of that while we are going through this next 90 minutes. So welcome to this 90-minute session. Our focus is on comms. And here's the interesting thing about comms, right? We all do it all the time. It's our thing. And even when you're silent, you're communicating, as you all know from your own personal lives. Communication is something that is happening all the time. People are receiving messages you didn't send. People are ignoring messages that you actually sent, and so on and so forth. In the workplace, communication is the only tool, perhaps, that leadership and the organization has to communicate motivation and intent. It's one of the many tools in which you can cover other things, right? How to do stuff, when to do it, schedules, etc. There are other ways to get it done. But if you're not able to share your motives and your intent in a meaningful fashion, much of the value of what you're trying to say gets lost. And when I say you, I mean you, the individual, but I also talk about the organization. These are complex times, and I won't underestimate where you're coming from by underlining why it's complex times. But let me focus on complexity from the perspective of us, right? Wearing our leadership hat, wearing our trying to get things done hat. If you look at where we are headed, we are in an environment which is that whole VUCA thing comes into high prominence. We are in a scenario where uncertainty is pretty large, it's the cloud that's hanging over every conversation, every statement, every plan, every action. And that adds, if not anything else, nothing else on the play, that adds a layer of complexity that we haven't been used to before. The other interesting thing, perhaps interesting is the poor choice of words, but I'm taking a step back and looking at things as they happen. And if you think about it, is among the few cases where your business pressures to deliver are happening side by side with intense focus on health, personal health, and they're happening together. And that is giving rise to some opportunities. That is also giving rise to some questions on, are we doing things right? Can we get things done right? The reason why, as Sudeshna said, we wanted to bring in the research from these three organizations into one storyline was because we saw comms, communication, as being equally focused on context, on relevance, right? Both of these are equally important. And there has to be an underpinning of structure with which you can land it. So structure plus context plus relevance, relevance to me, relevance to the person who's listening, together make for successful communication. So how do we make it happen? How do we make it happen in an environment like this? Was what we thought was the focus of this webinar, was where our heads are. The thinking essentially is we're walking into a discussion where you are thinking of a communication you're making as a leader to your organization, or you're helping a leader make a communication to the organization. Whatever the context is, we are thinking of this being a leadership messaging event of some kind that you're thinking about, and you're wondering, how do I land this? It's a how to, right? It's very how focused, and that's why I said we want to make this as doable as possible, right? So I'm going to be encouraging you during this conversation to grab a sheet of paper. I'm hoping you have a sheet of paper next to you. Sheet of paper will be useful, right? If I ask you to open a PowerPoint slide, you're going to do some jazzy stuff. I don't want jazzy stuff. So just keep a sheet of paper and pen next to you. That's one request. Any questions you have on the content, on the discussion, etc., please raise it on the Q&A chat. There's a Q&A icon. Please raise it over there anytime during the session, right? What Sudeshna is doing is tracking the Q&A, so she will pop in the questions as and when there's an opportunity. The other request is any questions that you have on the technical part. This is working, this is not working, who do I reach? Where is this, where is that? Any questions which are about the slides, the content, the stuff like that, please raise it on the chat window, which will go directly to the panelists. So that's my only request. Keep the chat mostly for the technical questions and the Q&A for the content related questions. So that's one, I'm declaring my motive and intent for the session. Try and give you structure, context, and means to make your communication as relevant to your audience as possible, and make you work your way through it. Now, the work your way through it, I don't know what you guys have in mind. You're on the other end of a comp. So one way in which we're going to be aligning where each of us is coming from is using something called Poll EV. Poll EV is a short form for Poll Everywhere. That URL, pollev.com/marg transform, is our URL. And if you go to that URL, you should be seeing on your screen, if you go on your browser, on your phone, etc., you should be able to see this, a box in which you can enter some text. And when you enter text, it turns up on the comp in this fashion, right? So let's start with that. Let's start with getting some input from you on what communication are you thinking of as we engage with today. So again, please go to pollev.com/marg transform. On that URL, you should see this question, and whatever you enter should pop up on the screen now. The question is, what is the comms challenge? What did you have in mind as a challenge in the communication as you came to this conversation? That's a great one. Yes. And those are all great items, right? Comms channels are packed. One way to look at it, they're dense. There is too much of information that's floating in and out, and all of it is urgent. All of it's important. There, from an audience perspective, people are not really getting back and even acknowledging. Forget response. Sure, you have calendar invites that people are not responding to, right? Face-to-face communication is difficult. Even in this context, there is a challenge where people now, I mean, first couple of months, people were accepting a lot of meetings, but now it's slowed down. The feedback loop is a big issue, and we're going to be talking about the feedback loop in this conversation. Given the fact that it's only half, it's only, if it's primarily email, they're not getting paisa vasool out of it, right? We're not really getting a bang for the buck. How do you plan? How do you communicate? Excessive communicating. That's just everyone is communicating. And we're leaving it to the audience to pick. It's like your email has become your local magazine, right? Tons of information, tons of articles coming up, and people are assuming you have the time to choose to read the important stuff. And if you don't read it, I'm going to come after you. So yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love that one. Expectations of more engaging, flashy communications. The number of times I'm asked, you know what, Krish, we do our email all the time. Can you give us something more jazzy? And as we're going to learn in this conversation, perhaps before we go for jazzy, can we make it more effective? And much of today is going to be about making it as effective as possible. Single source of truth. That animal is a tough animal. Um, and again, we're going to touch upon that towards the latter half when I call out some of the expectations I have of leaders during this time on what they can help us do. Yeah, video is go to. YouTube has ruined it for all of us, hasn't it? But guess what? In the current environment that we are in, probably YouTube is, or video is the best substitute you have for a face-to-face. I'm just waiting for a couple more just for us to get a flavor, right? Ensuring it gets, how do you make sure that it's landed? I think there was an earlier one on feedback loop, right? How do you make sure it's landed? Uh, Whiteboard animations that mixture of talk, mixture of picture. The eye likes movement. The eye likes motion. That's one of the reasons I'm standing and speaking, right? If you're sitting, you'll be like, okay, get moving. I did or something. But moving makes a difference, and animation makes a difference. So the medium does make a difference, absolutely. Where do you come from when you make these communications? Who do you present yourself as? And are people engaged enough to hear where you come from before they quickly read and say, yeah, not interesting. Yeah, not interesting. And do you have the chance to connect with people? And connection is going to be very, very important. Thank you for sharing this. And the reason why I shared all of this is to make sure that we have an appreciation that, look, we're all in the same boat. We're all trying to make our communication have an impact. We all want our communication to land. Now, here's the truth, right? We are communicating all the time. And when we are communicating all the time, typically it is about something that we want to get done, right? And there are, God knows, there are 1,000 projects that are all happening. And our poor employee is like, enough, stop. There's just too much coming my way. It's like a storm of communication coming their way. And part of the reason why the, the average, I ran into an employee who said, you know what, I stopped reading the newspaper. Why? There's no good news. And I'm scratching my head saying, that's not why you read a newspaper, not because it's good news or bad news, but it's because it's credible news. That's why you read a newspaper. And now if I take that story and put it in the organizational context, I've stopped reading emails. Why? Yeah, my manager will tell me what's important. Sorry, that doesn't work that way. Your manager is also going through the same loop. You have to make your own decisions, Mr. Employee, Miss Employee, on what communication you want to chase. But that is the fate of most of the communication at this point in time when we are shoving communication through one pipe. And why does this happen? And it happens partly. Those of you who are familiar with change management know where I'm taking this story, right? Part of the reason why this happens is because from a change management perspective, from a communication perspective, we're all focused on what we want the org to do. So when you communicate with someone, let's say you are project manager, you're communicating with someone for them to bless your project, accept your project, take an update on the project, make a decision on the project, approve of the project, God knows what. But guess what? You want something of them. And if I take one step back, it's probably not what you expect of them. It's what your role expects of their role. And now this is important. The same change management thinking that says we think in organizational terms also applies to communication, because in communication, we think in role terms. We think of the fact that my role needs this of you. You have to respond. That's why it's urgent. That's why it's important. I'm not asking. My seat is asking. My role in authority is asking. And the problem is that person is also in a role. There are also 100 demands, in which case, unfortunately, that person reacts also from their role saying, Let's talk priorities. Let's do this later. Talk to the hand. I don't want to speak with you. And communication fails. When we think as an organization, be it on change or be it on communication, we fail because eventually it's employees and individuals that make changes, that accept communication, that act on them. It's not a function that is saying yes or no. It's an Anna, it's a Bala, it's a Chandra, it's a Zia, it's a human being. It's a human being on the other side who's willing to accept a change, who's willing to read your communication, who's willing to act on it. It all boils down to an individual. Why is this important for us? Because we all know this. Most of the time, when you speak about impactful communication, you want that person to make a change. You want the person to sign up. You want the person to start doing something, stop doing something, or you're congratulating them, continue doing something, or you want them to think well of you, or you wanted them to think well of the project. In any of these contexts, you are basically asking for something from them. That's your ask. That's the change. And the moment you're getting into the change game, you have to think about the fact that the first question in their brains is why? Why should I read this? Why should I care about this message? And that's all decision making happening at the subject line level in the inbox. It's probably happening at the sender level. Forget subject line. Who sent it is probably more important to me than the subject line itself. I'm going to quickly scan it and say, not interested. So the why is absolutely critical. Why must you read this message? And as we know from experience, because I've understood the why, doesn't mean that I should like it. And those of you who ever sent a message as a leader, as a manager to your team saying, please read this big strategy change that is coming up, know that no one reads it. Every time you forward a message saying performance appraisal rules are scaling, no one reads it. Anytime you send a mail that says compensation is changing, everyone has read it. And they read it even before you send the message. They read it when your boss sent it to you, right? So people's desire for connecting with that message, reading that message, connecting with the change, being a part of the change, it's not necessarily just rational. It's not just the awareness part. Because it's important, people don't do it. It's got to be important and they should feel the relevance. Then comes, what are you trying to say? And you know the amount of time you take, the pain you take to write, to draft your message, to see whether you can put it in boxes, in tables. Do I copy paste from here or not? That's worth it. Because eventually that message, when they start reading, it should make sense from them. They should know what is expected of them. You have seen the pain, you've felt the pain of seeing a mail from someone on your phone, and the first few lines do not tell you what is it that's required. You read, you read, you read, and the last sentence there's something they're saying, what do you want from me? The K, the knowledge, the appreciation of what is expected is absolutely important. Then comes ability, the fourth stage, the fourth obstacle for you to get their buy-in. Can they do it? Let's say you're telling me, you know what, Krish, come in 2 minutes before every meeting. Awareness, why should I do it? I'm already in other three other meetings. You tell that, it's like the Diva dialogue, right? Go tell that guy to stop his meeting earlier so I can come for this meeting earlier, right? So until that person stops, I won't stop. Awareness. Desire. Okay, so I got that person to stop. Why should I join your meeting 2 minutes early? I would rather have a bio break and come back. I would rather take a break and come back. I want to prepare something else and come back. I don't want to. You know, people are asking too many things. I don't want to do it. So I don't want to do it is the desire part. You tell them 2 minutes early and they've got their buy-in, they want to do this. Then when I want to do it, I'd start trying to do it. And immediately the meeting I'm setting up with the next person, that person says, why only 28 minutes? Why have you picked an odd number? When I'm converting that knowledge to ability, that's when someone else is pushing back and I say, you know what? So many people are asking questions. I don't want to do it. So if you notice the latter half of this, the initial part of this game is about, are you even willing to do it? The latter half of the message is, how do I do it? How do I get it happening? This is absolutely important. This is where, when I'm struggling, when no one is accepting my 28-minute meeting invites, when I'm rejecting 28-minute meeting invites, someone comes to me and says, you know what, Krish, we're noticing that you're trying your best to do these 28-minute meetings. Appreciate it. I know it's going to take time, but worth the effort. Notice now where communication fits into this is change. This is how people go through change. The interesting part is number one, when you think about how change lands, there is a storyline around change where these items are all connected with each other. They're not individual boxes, right? Good awareness leads to desire, desire leads to knowledge, etc., etc. But from a comms perspective, what's interesting for us is comms drives that initial awareness. Comms also drives reinforcement. The interesting part, where do comms, why am I picking up comms when I describe, why am I describing change when I'm describing comms? The reason is most of the time, our communications are about changes. And if you ask, what is the role my communications plays in the changes? You need to nail this part. Why are we doing it? What is the story here? And remember, there are two parts to it. Why are we doing it? Why am I doing it? And then there is this, how well did we do? This is your classic Lagero Munna Bhai message, right? Keep working hard and eventually you'll get the results. You need that message because people struggle with the fact that they don't know how well they're doing. They're not necessarily appreciated. They may not have a strong recognition system. Communication does a spectacular job on these three. If you ask Krish, what about these in the middle? My response is, if you think about what makes people want to do it, want to read your message, you know the drill, right? People read the message because their peers read the message, right? The desire, knowledge, and ability comes from the actions of others. But awareness and reinforcement comes from the right messaging. So our game today is how do we make our employees or who are your audiences, right? Like maybe you're sending it to the board of directors, right? Who are your audiences? How do you make them comfortable with why we are doing a change? And to that purpose, what we're going to do from this point is actually draft out a communication, right? So think of one communication that you want to send, that it's coming up, right? And we're going to draft out how that whole storyline looks like. Keeping this picture in mind, keeping in mind that what we are doing is make people buy into something. Like that's our pitch. That's what we are trying to get them towards. Sometimes it might be just you guys are doing a good job, in which case it's a reinforcement message. So, but remember, good communication has three parts. It has structure, it has context, it has relevance. You make it relevant to the audience, right? We're discussing structure. You need to put a structure over here. In this context, the first thing I would like you to think about is who are you sending it to? Which is this audience? They are individual contributors, they are middle managers, they are senior managers, they are executives. Who are they? Who are they in the world that you belong to? The next part is this. What can you say in that message to capture their minds? So in this context, what I've highlighted right now are the key messages I would like you to capture as bullet points. My request is from this point onwards, I have this picture of a sheet of paper, right? So I'm requesting you on the sheet of paper, on the top left, capture the audience you have in mind, right? On the right side, I would like you to capture a few bullets on the key messages you're sending. And my request is think about these questions I've asked over here. Why do you want them to read this message? Why do you want them to focus on whatever change, whatever thing you're asking them to do? Why now? What is the urgency? What happened today? What is the trigger? What if I don't? It was working, something else was working fine till yesterday. Why do you want me to do this new? What's in it for me? What's going to happen to me? And tell me more. If I want more details, where will I go? So these are all things that research tells us people love to hear about. And all this is about structure, right? I'm not done with the story. And some of you are going to say, yeah, well, there's a long mail. Don't think it's a long mail. It doesn't have to be all in one mail. And I'm going to give you research-based insights on how to break this up. But for the moment, I would like you to think of one comms that you intend to make and capture some of this. Those of you who are change practitioners know there are very many more tools that can help you in this, but I'm not going there. Just as layman, I'm asking you to consider this. I'm going to give you 1 minute in which to grab a sheet of paper and get this done. Sudesh, in the meanwhile, are there any questions that I can take while the team works on the 1 minute challenge? I think you're on mute, Sudesh.
Sorry, no, I guess it was something on the audience. So you are going to cover the audience. So
yes,
yeah. So as to who are we going to?
In that case, hold it. Thank you. So at this point, I'm asking you to paint with a slightly broad brush. I'm asking you to consider a team, a function, a group of people that you're speaking with. But as you notice, I'm asking you to split them up in terms of the kind of responsibility they handle. An individual contributor is handling responsibilities perhaps around transactions. Maybe there's an individual contributor in your shop who's the head of Agile. Maybe that person is the head of OD. Maybe that person is the head of process excellence or revenue assurance or governance, risk and controls, right? So I'm not saying all individual contributors are handling transactional stuff, but I'm like that's why I said broad brush. Think of employees, individual contributors, people who are looking for crisp, clear direction. Then think of people managers, and that's a wide zone, right? You could have 50 levels of uh, everything from supervisors to senior development managers. You have 20 levels, you could have 10 levels, you could have 3 levels. But I'm saying think of an organization which has all those levels, think of people managers, and finally think of executives. Executives, approving authorities, people who are very senior, who are CXOs, and so on and so forth. And I'm asking you to break your audience or think of your audience in these 3 categories. As we go a little further, we'll think about what else this could mean for us. But for the moment, just these 3 categories. All right. Now you have something on a sheet of paper. You have on the left side an audience. On the right side, you have some of the key messages you're going to send. And remember, I hope that when you thought about these key messages, they were not in terms of go get this done, reduce costs, reduce this, reduce that. It wasn't along those lines. It was more along the lines of why are you asking for this? Why now? What is the trigger? What is the business trigger? What is the contextual trigger? What is the situational trigger? What if we didn't do it? And so on and so forth. So we are trying to answer the question of why don't people read our messages? Because our messages don't tell them this. Our messages are right now focused primarily on, sorry, one sec, on these 2 areas. Right now, many of our messages are focused just in the middle zone, right? They're focused just on go do this by this date, get this done. I need this approval, I need that, and so on and so forth. What we did right now when you created the template that you created was pushed ourselves a little bit into that awareness and desire zone. We are trying to get them to be interested. When you answer a why, you always get some attention because the why question is their question and you've gone ahead and answered that. Now let's keep this in mind as we now keep the structure in mind. We're going to fill up the rest of this with more information. Let's keep this aside for a moment and think about the context, specifically the cultural context. Prosci research already tells us that guess what? During times of change, during times of stress, as we are going through, where there is resistance, a good chunk of the resistance can come from the org's culture, can come from how people have already seen change succeed, change fail, communication succeed, communication fail, leaders succeed, leaders fail, and so on and so forth. People come into some of these conversations with some baggage. The other part is if you want to be successful in rolling out your communication, rolling out your change, the only way for you to do that is to be sensitive to where they are mentally, where the organization's culture is mentally. But here is the thing, where are we right now in this pandemic driven world? Where are we? What kind of environment are we in? So I would like to address that question in our chart, right? But before I do that, let me ask you that question. According to you, right now, given how things are progressing, how do you see employees seeing leadership? What is at this point in time? At this point in time, when employees are hearing from leadership and seeing leadership, what are they seeing them leadership as? What qualities do they see in the leaders?
Can you, a lot of people joined a little later, so can you just again reiterate the poll we talked
Oh, I'm
about?
sorry. Sure. So for those of you who came in later, thanks, Alishna. For those of you who came in later on some other device, if you would like, if you can go to this URL, polev.com/marg transform. If you go to that link, you will see a question in a box. And if you enter any text in that box, you will see them, you'll be able to enter data. You'll be able to enter phrases, enter numbers, etc., etc. And when you do that, that will turn up on the screen as it is doing right now. That's a lovely point. Like I said, the beautiful part about what's happening is business priorities and personal priorities are kicking in, and we are seeing leaders showing real emotions. They are showing empathy. There is some, and I see the less empathetic also, right? So there is a mix, and there is a fair bit of mix on how this is going. We are seeing that leaders with a BCP are actually doing pretty well. Yes, there is that sense of perhaps aggressiveness, maybe it is seen as aggressiveness because this time, this date, this point in time, no flexibility and so on and so forth. Perhaps that's also emerging, very likely. The employee safeties and priorities, and again, empathy is definitely a part of it. Leaders have adopted the digital world very quickly, and I like that part, right? There is definitely their worry that is showing up. And as one leader to another, I think it is damn healthy for leaders to show employees that they're also worried. I don't have all the answers. I am also struggling, and this is the best of what I know. Uh, I see that optimism, you're right. I see optimism, and somewhere I also see leaders in survival mode taking tough calls and being honest, right? Leaders are scared, absolutely right. There is an enormous amount of pressure. And some of the leaders have also expressed the pressure in terms of, I owe this to my team. How do I get them successful? Uh, these points are absolutely right. The fact that they are uncertain, they are scared, that's a mounting fear. There's a mounting fear in their own abilities, right? I don't think I can do this well. And eventually, what happens to me, they have not had support. You're right. Many of the leaders I'm working with do not have the support. They don't have a safety net. Um, I find it interesting. Sometimes I've heard leaders say, Krish, there isn't someone I can confess my weakness to. I mean, my employees, I'm telling them, come and talk to me if you're in trouble. Who do I go and talk to? And I'm finding them more vulnerable than I've seen them before. The digital transformation hit. Thanks for sharing this. Thanks. And I see the adaptability. Like I said, the buy-in was very, very useful. Actually, responsiveness, their calendars are way more open than they used to be. It's no longer mere cabin pe aa jao. No, it's basically just set up a meeting and I will be there. And they are there meeting. They're no longer thinking about 10 meetings, overbooking, etc., etc. I'm able to reach them. So thank you for sharing this. And I thought this is very, very important. Finally, client centric. Absolutely right. They are. Here's the beautiful thing, right? Between customer, organization, and the whole supply chain, there is far more synchronicity because we're all sailing the same boat. I'm finding friction at a meta level across organizations also at a different stage, but I'll not open that Pandora's box. Thank you for sharing this. And I hope you notice that I'll just switch back to a word cloud mode. I think it's worth it to do that. Look at the items that turned up from a word cloud perspective as being large. And you see empathetic and empathy turning up. Cautious does turn up. Safety does turn up. Business need turns up. So if you look at what we are saying that it looks like this is an environment in which we can serve a little better. This is an environment where working with yesterday's premise of, yeah, leaders are not going to be heard, leaders are not good, being cynical about leaders perhaps is not helpful. We are seeing that in this environment, leaders are stepping up pretty often. That is not it's a sweeping generalization. Just see that it's stepping up. And where is this coming from? This is coming from human synergistics. Human synergistics is an organization that's been around for 50 years, focused on organizational culture. and they run cultural assessments. We run cultural assessments. The culture assessment focuses on where is the organization. Is it essentially a task-focused organization? Is it a people-focused organization? Is it a constructively task and people-focused organization? So we do these assessments, and during COVID-19, we have been doing these assessments more frequently, and the results are positive. They're good. They're encouraging. But now let's link this back to our count story. What should we keep in mind, given that this is the context, given that perhaps the communication you have in mind is going from such a leadership group or such an environment, from such leadership group to such an audience? Here are 2, 3 things which are, again, along the lines of best practice finding. Number one is, yes, there is a huge wave where in this environment, employees and leaders are respectful of both business and safety. Both of them have come together. And this is a beautiful moment. This is a beautiful time where leaders can emphasize the shared learning. One of the banking organizations I know there's a message that was going out on classic digitalization. We are moving to the cloud, etc., etc. But they took this opportunity to take a step back and said, this whole journey, this pandemic, has taught us the value of the service we provide, the importance of the service we provide, the peace of mind that our brand, bank, account holders, etc., our stakeholders have, because they're working with a reliable brand like us. And in this context, this move to digitalization is in fact risky. We are facing a lot of challenges because we don't want to drop the ball. We can't afford to drop the ball. We need help, but we think we can do it. Putting it in this way made that communication all of a sudden something that connected the audience, the organization, the purpose, and the context. There's another organization, this is more in the retail space, and they were sending out messages at this point in time to their larger group of wholesalers, distributors, etc., etc. And you know the context in which we are in, right? And those are segments that are really struggling. And the message was very simple. We cared for you. We cared for you yesterday. We'll care for you tomorrow. But we don't know how. Let's be successful together. But before that, let's be safe together. Short message, nothing major, nothing big, nothing jazzy, but it landed beautifully. And the reason why I'm saying it's landed beautifully is because the reaction to that is, chalo, saath mein kya kare? There is community building that is happening. And where I'm heading with this again is, this is a moment where your comms can leverage the environment around us and I underline the fact that we are actually doing better together than we were ever before. We are more collaborative than we were before. Leaders are being seen as with less cynicism than they were before. But all this is going to work only if you, when you're communicating, underline that. You have to give it headline space. It can't be just about my project, my message, give me this, give me that. Contextualize it. The second aspect is, right now your audiences, and now comes the breakup of audiences, right? Be it your individual contributors or your managers or your senior leaders, we are seeing that they're all focused on what is real, what we know. The baggage, all the distrust, all the frustration has taken a backseat. Yes, there is concern. Yes, there is fear. Yes, there is uncertainty. All that is existing. But relationships are actually, for now, a little better than they were before. We are seeing everyone, this across the pyramid, but definitely at the lower levels, people are focusing more on, what do I know for sure? What is this? What is this? What is this? The last part is, at some level, we need to make sure that whatever we are saying, we need to reinforce it. We need to have feedback loop. We need to underline it, because otherwise the learning is going to be lost. All this empathy you're seeing, all this connection you're seeing, it is going to flip. It's going to go away. So somewhere we need to make sure our comms is reiterating messages, reiterating the fact that this is working, this is working, this is working, not focusing just on what we want as a sender, but we also need to make them feel, hey, guess what? This is landing well, and it's because of you, it's because of your help. Let's go back to your mail over the last 2 weeks. Look at your sent messages. How many thank you messages are you sending? How many acknowledgement messages have you sent? your ecosystem. Look at your instant messaging group. How many are you sending? This is a time for you to do it because, again, we are seeing this camaraderie happening slowly. Look, guys, very honestly, this is the kind of stuff we used to see in the CSR activities in the organization, right? When you say, let's go paint the village, paint the school, and that Enthuk is what you saw is what you're seeing now. And you have an opportunity over here to leverage that. But so this is one part of the storyline. The cultural context is ripe for us to communicate honestly, directly, contextually to our audiences. However, during times of change, there is a concept called senders and receivers. What is senders and receivers? I'm asking you to mentally visualize it, right? There is one person slowly painting a wall. Someone comes and says, hey, Krish. And I say, stop. I'm painting this wall. And the person is saying, Krish, I'm saying, stop. I'm painting the wall. And then I finally turn and the guy says, you have the wrong paint. This is senders and receivers. The sender is sending the message which is urgent, for the receiver, which is important. The receiver hears it purely with the focus of what I am painting carefully. I cannot have an interruption. Don't talk to me. This is senders and receivers. And why is senders and receivers important for us to know? It is important for us to know because all the stuff that I just finished saying about culture, that we are in an environment where things are changing for the better. And this is data, right? Because we are doing the analysis for companies and we are seeing the temporary change, right? We don't know whether it's going to be permanent, and we are guiding organizations on how to make it stick. But as we see this flip, we are seeing the senders and receivers also acting. Receivers are still focused on why are you telling me this? What's in it for me? Why should I hear this? They are hearing only part of the message. They're not hearing the whole message. Let me check whether that is right. And let me ask you a more deeper question. What influences this? I'm sure we've all gone through this, right? Where someone is pushing a message at us and we are selectively hearing it. We are hearing only something that's making sense for us. My question to you is, what are some of those factors that influence what I hear? So I'm not hearing everything that is said. What are the factors that influence what I actually hear? Absolutely right. Uh, Incidentally, whoever said timing is also going to shoot me because I'm eventually going to say that you need to repeat your messages, right? But yes, timing is important. State of mind, relation with the speaker is a beautiful point. Who are you? What kind of credibility do you have? Relevance and impact, the negativity involved or the positivity involved, the cynicism involved, clarity of the content. Beautiful points. Replicate the message post. Peers talking around. Who else is talking about it? Escalations of, I mean, who else do you see on the CC list that makes you start wondering, BCC mein, who else is there? Your personal state is important. You connect with the audience. How is that person saying something that relates to me? Am I nodding when the person is saying it when I'm reading it? If not, I'm going to lose it. My investment and interest in the current situation, I don't care. I want to go back home. My family is sitting elsewhere. I'm a transient employee. Someone else sitting somewhere else, and I got these personal challenges. That makes a huge difference. How the message is constructed is important because it is not look and feel. It is, does it talk to me? Look and feel is a subset. Content is definitely part of it. Am I the right person is important. And within first two sentences, no, this is not for me. This is for that person. Within the first two sentences, you might switch off. Thank you for sharing this. And this was important. This tells you already that there is a selectivity to the hearing, and it is something we can probably do a little bit about. We have a little bit of control over it. If we take some of these and push it into our world, how do we push it? We're going to push it by the following. A, we're going to send messages primarily with two voices. When it is a message that is about big picture, big issues, upcoming broader things, we're going to get big boxes and CXOs to send it. When it is about an impact on an employee, we're going to do our best to cascade it. We're going to do our best to not be the PM who sends it, the CM who sends it, the HR head who sends it, the director of operations who sends it, CTO who sends it. We're going to do our best to pass it on to managers and say, managers, you send this message. This is data from the research which says that people read messages based definitely on who sent it from. But the rest of it that you guys pointed out are absolutely important. We also make sure that we send messages 5 to 7 times. 5 to 7 times. Do you need to send all messages 5 to 7 times, especially when you talked about clutter and the volume of messages? No. Does it need to be different more medium? Yes. And I'm not saying do this for everything or the world will go mad, but I'm saying you came into the session with a key communication in mind, with something that is high pressure and high involvement for you in mind. For that communication, you need to do this. You need to repeat it. Data tells us, research tells us it has to be done 5 to 7 times. Make sure it's face to face. Face to face, now coming back to the video call. Yes, everyone wants a video, I agree. But the difference between this video and someone saying, yeah, so I read your report, it looks fine. Let me just minimize the video and I'll talk to you about it, and then reads out from the document. That's not a video call. A video call is where I'm looking at your video. Um, in general, in video calls, typically people have found that people look at their own videos. No, you should be looking at the other person and asking, how are you feeling? Hey, that's a new haircut, isn't it? Make the video call like a face-to-face call. That's using video well. That's using face-to-face. Answer what's in it for me. Absolutely right. And this is your challenge as a communicator. Look at the mails you have received in the last 2 weeks. How often is a what's in it for me abundantly clear? Some of you are saying, boss, to do their own work, why should we give them what's in it for me? They're already doing their own work. What you came in your programming language perspective is an interrupt, right? It is your notification on your phones or your notification on your comp. That person doesn't need to see it. So what's in it for me is important. Try and use as much of this. I'm not going to suggest a Q&A for your typical mail. None of this was for your typical mail. This is for you to draft a top-notch communication. The last part is feedback loop. After you all do all that, check what did they understand. Check if that made sense. So with this in mind, I want you to now populate the next section of your one pager. First, I want you to think of that audience. Remember the culture context that I just talked about, right? Think about what's running in their mind. Were there a team that was really a function that was really caught off guard, or the organization was caught off guard during this whole cycle? Have they been pushing themselves really harder? Have they been dealing with some other changes? What is the context? What is the mindset they have when they are reading your message? A. B. What is the story they have in that communication, the change of yours? You're telling them, boss, you're the last, no one else has done it, please do it. Is it an employee engagement survey and they've not done it? Or are they the first adopters? What is their story? And the last part is, how are you going to send this to them? One of the cases that we were dealing with right now, we had the leaders do a skit, and 3-4 leaders did a skit to, I mean, it was a video call. Right? We would have got the whole organization to do it. No, we did it function by function. And it's like you're seeing these music videos and stuff like that, right? Yeah, the leaders doing a skit, bits and bits, and people loved it. And at least for a short time, everyone did everything that was asked, because the enthusiasm of the organization was very, very high. It was more regarded better than the annual day event where the leaders come and do a dance and go away. That was not as effective as this, because they said these guys actually took trouble to use this medium to make a difference. So think about your preferred medium. How are you going to pitch this to them? How are you going to say it? And on the other side, on this other box, I would like you to complete, how will you know this has landed? Because go back to your inputs you gave me short while back, right? Where you said people will be selectively listening. They will listen to only what's in it for them. How will you make sure what has landed is landing well? What will you repeat 5 to 7 times? You can't send the same mail 5 times. How are you going to make sure this message is popping in multiple times? One of the organizations we were working with found it very easy to keep updating the screensaver that they had with the most important message that they were going through at that point in time. The screensaver helped. It was clickable, it was linkable, and they were able to have some widgets in it so that while you're on the screensaver, you can go ahead and enter some message, etc., which caused other Windows security problems. But guess what? That worked. So there are different ways in which you can get that repetition part done. It doesn't have to be the typical way. It doesn't have to be repeated the same way 5 to 7 times. So here's my ask. I'll give you another 1 minute. I would like you to populate these two parts. Where is the mental state of your audience currently? And how are you going to make sure whatever you're saying here is actually landing, right? You have a minute to think this through. And in the meanwhile, Sudeshna, are there any questions I can take? I'm sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry. It was from the previous slide, I guess, that how to understand the interpretation apart from the feedback mechanism, the interpretation of the message. Yes.
I find it, so I typically in these contexts do two things when it's a critical communication. First, I get someone who's not my target audience, but a colleague, someone who's not connected in my project, but not a target audience, to, without any context, to read or review what I'm saying and ask, tell me two things you remember out of what I said. That's a frightening litmus test, because sometimes the person looks at you and says, too many words, I don't remember anything. And that might be a slap on your face, but it's worth it. So that's one test that I find very easy to do. The second thing, when you're dealing with a scaled group of people, when you're dealing with a large group of people, there is a reason why all of social media, mailers, etc., have that thing called call to action. A call to action is a next step. You're sending a message, and most of the organizations I'm working with nowadays have mail. They have mail tracking, just like your MailChimp kind of stuff, so they can track what happens in an email. So, end of the mail, please vote on X or Y. If you're not getting any votes, they didn't even reach there. They didn't care enough. If you have finished this, read this article sitting over there. How many went to the article? If you've read this, please go to the SharePoint and edit this document. How many went to the SharePoint and edit the document? So if you're not just crudely sending a feedback survey, build in an action and see how many took the action. I must warn you that these are brutal mechanisms, right? But the first few times you're going to have, you went on to murder a few people saying, why aren't you guys doing it? Because the numbers look low. But as you get good at this, you'll be able to manage your communication, manage it in the way we are describing, that they say, hey, this makes perfect sense. Suresh, did that respond? I mean,
yeah, so he was asking for that you were talking about push, any pull mechanism. I think you covered it in terms of the call to action. I guess that would help.
Yep.
There are questions coming in. I'm keeping it till the end now. You can continue.
Keep in mind, sure. So keep in mind, teasers help. Keep in mind, but I'm finding in the current environment, people have more frustration and less patience with teasers. Get to the point. Tell me what you want quickly, right? So in general, the reason why we started off with the audience, and then we said these points are critical, guys. If at the end of the message, they are not able to understand this or some of this, the rest of it is words. And in the current environment, there is a high pressure to act. There's a high pressure to do. There's a high pressure to experience. There is not much mental patience with food for thought. So if you're giving food for thought, treat it with a little more caution. Make it as actionable as possible is my ask. And that's why those questions are driving you in that direction. All right. So this is on the part of how do you make sure that it's not only the structure, and this page is going to be eventually a structure, but it's also about the context. What is the context? And respecting their context, how do you make sure it lands? There is more that we can do from a relevance perspective. Let's think about that, right? Relevance comes from two places. There's one part of relevance that comes from the fact that the person who's sending it is someone who cares about me, who's important, who has context, who's intelligent, who's experienced, who's successful, and so on and so forth. The halo effect around the fact that the leader is communicating and doing a good job is critical part. There's another piece, which is the fact that no matter what you send, people have a way in which they think. We all have a style of functioning. We all have a style of working on things. Our brain accepts information and chooses to act on ideas based on how I'm hardwired. And each of us have some kind of hardwiring that's in the play. And everything that someone says to them is processed with that perspective. So the initial part of awareness of the need for the change, the communication part, right? A lot of it is not going to be addressed with your broad and general communication. Relevance need to be a little more talking to me, connected to where I am. And if we are playing in that game, we need to think about what are the tools we can use. And that's where for us in MARG, emergenetics comes in. Emergenetics for us is the tool with which we consider how people think and how people behave. It's a profiling tool, and we use this a lot because it's more based on the brain, left brain, right brain, less based on psychology and so on and so forth. So again, from a research perspective, it connects really, really well to us. Emergenetics is a 2-decade-old organization. And one thing that I find very valuable about emergenetics is the profiles that they have are 1/3 North America, South America, 1/3 Europe, and 1/3 Asia. So the profiling is actually something that can connect it to them. It's not just, it's a truly global profiling comparison that I get. Why is this important? Because I can now, when I send my message out, I can add things that will appeal to someone who's got that analytical preference, structural preference, social preference, and so on and so forth. What do I mean by that? I don't want to make this a session on emergenetics, right? But let me just take you to some of the things you can add to your communications. And as you read, I bet this will connect because I'm expecting some of these items to connect to you. So let's say, and when I'm drafting the communication, I would draft it based on my own thinking view, right? So let's say I'm all about structure. I'm all about getting things done on a particular date, particular time. So most of my mail or speech or presentation is going to be about that. But if I went and added some clear high level reasoning and logic and data, it would appeal to those people who are saying, yeah, but 3 years back we did that, no? Have we left that behind? Aren't we going to connect it to that? That person who asks that question, for them, if you add this to your messaging, they'll say, oh, now I get it. Now I get the sequence. By the same token, if you provide a good solid schedule and make sure that this is how we're going to do it, and this is how the communication is going to go to this stakeholder, this is how I'm going to tell this stakeholder of yours who's asking these questions, the people who have that structural preference will say, yes, I get it. There are going to be someone in your audience, in your readers, in your listeners, who are all about community, who are all about, okay, what's going to happen to them? What about them? Okay, I covered our team. What about this team? And for them, when you speak about digital communities and you say, yes, we're going to do it. The simplest example is we were going through, again, a cloud-based change, which has slowed down. But as we went to the cloud-based change and the analytics discussion came up, we said, guess what? We need some people to volunteer to be not the classic UAT kind of crowd. We want you to be the crowd who's helping us understand how to take this to the organization. Because analytics is a strange subject and everyone understands something else with it. Can someone help us? Bam, we got people signed up. You can say, Chris, that sounds like you getting a change in network. But I'm trying to say that, does your communication appeal to them? If your communication was just data and process, are they going to be interested or are they going to switch off? The emergenetics helps me think about who all read it and give something for different groups of people. It makes my message more colorful. People who have that conceptual preference, you need to help them understand how this connects in the larger scheme. The big picture view, the vision, right? Remember that there are also behavioral preferences. I often give my example on this. When I'm watching YouTube videos, I try to put them on double speed and put the subtitles on and put it on mute. I would rather read, right? So that's my preference. Now, if you put it on video, I'm not going to be listening more than some time. I love audiobooks and I hate them. I love the idea of audiobooks. I hate sitting and listening to something. I like to read stuff. So think about this comes back to that 5 to 7 times we were discussing, right? What are different ways in which you can repeat the message so that you can touch different people, different ways in which people want to absorb information? People love to know how are you going to meet challenges. Come back to some of the points you said on leadership, on being indecisive, on leaders not necessarily taking quick action. Some of that kicks in over here. And lastly, try and call out what are the things that you know, what are the things you don't know, so that your environment, your people start saying, at least I'm clear on what is going to be up in the air, no one knows anything about, and what is going to be very specific. The point of this page, like I said, I mean, I'm not taking you through this part of the page, and let's caught up with this part of the page. But I would like you to take the next 30 seconds and just look at these bullets and ask yourself in your message, do you think one or two of this could play a role? So 30 seconds. All right. And if you have chosen one or two, I would request you to go back to your picture over here. And in this picture, please can you add that as a bullet in this point, right? The reason we are keeping it separate is because this is your key message. This has to land, but you're going to add this to provide more connection with your audience. So can you add that bullet over here? Again, another 30 seconds. And in the meanwhile, Sudeshna, any questions? You're on mute.
There are quite a few. So I was just thinking, and like it is not like directly connected, but they are very important and very relevant questions. So we would keep it to the end.
We are a short distance away from the end, so I should be able to wrap up in the next 5-7 minutes.
Yeah,
Which will leave us on the 15
yes,
minutes.
yes.
Sounds good. So now that you have done this, brings us to the last point, which is the all critical point: sponsorship, the leadership, the person who's sending the message. All this relies on how are people seeing the sender. For the moment, perhaps you're sending it, maybe, right? But for the moment, let me assume that you're crafting this communication for someone else to send, right? And sometimes in our respective roles, whichever function we belong to, we need to craft a message for someone else to send. In sending good communication, I have 4 things that I need my leaders to do really, really well. I need my leaders, whoever is sending the message, whoever you're supporting and crafting that message, to should be a part of the preparing for the communication. They shouldn't just outsource and say, can you draft me an email? No, because you're discussing very powerful communication. You notice everything that we have said till now in that one sheet of paper is giving that communication a lot of attention, a lot of support, right? So in that context, I need them to engage and prep. I need them to do a good job in delivery. I need them to go through that repeating, reinforcing multiple times. And that last thing is utterly important. It's going to be very difficult if that leader doesn't connect with the other leaders and make sure that they are saying the same thing or connecting the same form or shape. So I need my leaders to do all 4 of this. And I'm asking, in general, for this communication you have in mind, what are they going to struggle with the most? And I'm really, really happy that delivering the communication is not a challenge. I'm just curious. I hope you guys have thought about the fact that communication can come in different medium. So I might ask them to blog about it. I might ask them to get onto a Slack channel about it. I might ask them to get onto a video about it. I might ask them to come on a town hall about it, and so on and so forth. But I'm really, really encouraged that the challenge seems to be more about time and prioritization, which is the first item, than about getting the job done. Which is big thumbs up. Aligning the comms with other leaders in the current environment has actually improved a lot. I think that's a very good insight. I'm finding leaders talking the same language more. Um, we're working with an organization where we started the journey with a challenge around trust, especially at the leadership level. Uh, but then when COVID-19 has hit and the BCPs are in place, there was especially one leader that they were all struggling with. And that one person is in charge of BCP. And all of a sudden, they're all aligned and making that person successful. And when I go and ask, how's this working? They said, look, very clearly, Krish, at this point in time, that person is making us successful. I may not like the guy, but the guy is doing a good job. And I think that's a great scenario to be in. The reason I asked you to do this, the reason I asked you to capture this is you know your own story, you know where you stand, you know where your leader or your voice box, your loudspeaker, whoever you're going to send the communication through, you know where they stand. It is important for us to also get an overall picture. Look at this picture that's coming up. This picture is telling us that the point where they alone have the mic is not in itself the challenge. The point where they have to engage with you, buy into the structure that you're asking them to buy, where they have to repeat and reinforce and so on and so forth, or align. These things that you're asking them to do are going to be a challenge. And this brings us to the last box in our game. It's the box that we can't afford to take for granted. It would have been so easy to just focus on the content of the communication, but it is important for you to consider what support does that person, that sender, that leader need to send the message out. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to think about one thing you can do to make that leader understand that this comms has to be done really well. Just one thing. I'm just going to grab tea while you guys think. I'm back. And the 30 seconds are up. That, what I'm expecting is now you have a completed sheet. And this completed sheet answers a larger question, right? What does an effective comms plan look like? Those are, I've had some people from internal comms review this thing and say, bang on, right? What I've given, what we have worked our way through is what organizations are using currently to run the comms. And fundamentally, comms sends the right message to the right audience, by the right sender at the right time, and so on and so forth. This is what good comms does. And if you look at what we try to do in our application, we try to address the culture part. We try to address senders and receivers. We make sure that we're able to leverage cognitive styles. We're able to make sure that depending upon how they think, where they come from, we're able to add those nuggets to that mail, to that conversation, to that topic, to that fireside chat, whatever mechanism you like, in order to make this more meaningful. And that is why you went through creating that sheet of paper you did. Remember that fundamentally this became important because every time you send a comms out, you're asking for a change. You're asking them to stop doing something and focus on your message, whichever your medium is. And if you want to do that, you need to consider these aspects for it to be successful. My last question to you is, what are some things that, and we're going to switch into Q&A in a moment, but as we switch into Q&A, I'm curious on what are some things that you see as being key takeaways in this webinar. Something should happen now. Sorry, just 1 second. That is exceptionally important. If you have a spirit that every change you ask is asking for a change, every communication you send is asking for a change, it will help you a lot. Your audience want to hear, but they want to hear meaningful stuff. You want to hear meaningful stuff. You don't want to hear stuff that you have heard before. Comes from our guests. Leadership buy-in for commitment and communication dissemination. If there's nothing else you do, if you can get your leadership to understand the value of good communication and you do this for them once or twice, your credibility with them increases hugely. If you make your leaders talk about the top right portion, why, what are we asking, how are we asking, etc., etc., trust me, I've seen leaders get better at communication because they're working with you on things like this. Sureshna, while these questions, some of these items come up, thank you. I was really hoping someone would say the action sheet would help. Right? I think the action sheet is exceptionally important. I hope you're not, cracking a joke. I will take away my action sheet. But thanks for saying that. Sureshna, are there any questions that I can answer while these
Yes,
responses
yes.
come?
I'll just put up the question as well as I'll, at the same time, would like to everybody to leave a feedback today. Thanks, thanks very much for being an engaging audience. And another question your way, Krish. If communication which form of communication should be more important, formal or informal? I'm assuming context in terms of the times this question is asked.
I would ask you to marry the audience's needs to the sender in answering that question. What do I mean by that? Sometimes I work with okay, I'm going to take function names. If someone is from those functions, don't get sent to me, right? I might talk to the architecture function in the IT group, right? And they would like some formality and some specificity about what I'm communicating to them. Whereas if I'm talking to a DevOps community, they will be like, give me 5 things to do, I'll get that done, right? If I'm talking to the sales team, they would be far more interested in actually funda kya? What is the story behind this? They would like to get that informal storyline much more than say the finance guys who might be far more about, okay, in which meeting did this get blessed, right? So where I'm going with this is remember that there are some functional styles that kick in. So that's one driver, formality and informality. The reason I said think about the sender is informal communication works better when there's credibility available. If there isn't the credibility, you cannot bet on it. You cannot rely on it because it's going to sound like, well, I also don't know, you also don't know, and you're saying it's informal, but actually it's formal because I'm not getting anything more from you. So the credibility factor which comes from the sender is absolutely important. It's the marriage between these two that's going to make your choice of formal and informal better. I must say, research is proving that social media based communication is growing like dramatically, even within organizations, right? Why? Because people are seeing immediacy kind of equals transparency. So to that extent, that mental bridge seems to be there, but I wouldn't necessarily bet on it. I would still rely on where is the audience? How does the audience usually consume information, reliable information? Is a sender a reliable sender? And then choose the method.
So as a continuation, it is like if the communication comes from the top boss, does it have more weight or does it get classified as being formal or informal?
So what we have learned, and this is again research backed, people want to hear not necessarily from the top boss. It's not just the group MD who needs to tell me. I need to hear it from someone I see as being in charge of my function. I need to hear it from someone who I see as being a leader. And probably that's the most important point, right? In communication, it's not just authority that drives it, but it's my view of whether you are my leader or not that drives it. So again, I'm saying, you have seen, every one of us has seen messages that come from the MD saying, make this happen, not happen. It still takes its own sweet time. I've seen messages that go out from one member of a team spread like wildfire. So I don't think that the authority and the hierarchy alone crack it. And I'm speaking especially from an Indian context, especially from an Asian context, right? Yes, we are very respectful of authority, but when that message is about doing something, changing something, stopping, making a sacrifice, changing our mindset, I need something more than just authority. I need to see, are you going to lead me through the issues? I'm still sticking to net. Make your choice on formal or informal based on where's the audience and who the sender is in relation to the audience. One last thought, I've also seen some senders are very uncomfortable with informal communications. So the audience might want it, but they are very, uh, they're, they're quiet, rather than be in the informal context and they struggle with that. So the sender's storyline is very important. Yes,
Yeah,
Vishnu.
understand that part. Okay, this is a good one. Is there an appropriate time the communication needs to land when there will be an impact on jobs?
So one of the clients, one of the groups we were working with, it was this kind of an environment. And we had a leader in that team who said, I'm setting up a call every day, 3 p.m., half an hour call. Invite goes to everyone in this function, about 400 odd people, 400 odd people. And the guy says, every day, 3 o'clock, I'm going to be on this call. And when I have information, I will share it. But just so you know, every day I'll be at the call. And every day for nearly a month, the person was on the call till they got the information, till messages start trickling in. But what happened in that period was that group of 400 people knew that this boss will tell us when it happens, whatever happens. This was beautiful because essentially what you're doing in troubled times, when everyone knows that there aren't ready answers, you're having a leader stand up and say, I don't have the answers, but I'm willing to expose myself to not having an answer and commit that you will know it when I know it. So is there a good time? Is there a early time, late time? These are times when you're talking about job loss, there's a direct impact on two groups. The people who are losing your roles also are struggling with that uncertainty. The people who are retained are also struggling with uncertainty. And it's very easy to do this wrong. And one of the ways to do it wrong is to cascade it. You want to move as soon as meaningfully possible. And for me, meaningfully possible is when you have answers to all the questions. You have answers to the questions of what is going to happen to me. You also have the answer to the question of how are you going to support me. You're also going to answer the question of why me. You're able to answer the emotional question, the rational question, and what support the organization can give. The moment you can have a tick mark on all these questions is the earliest time you can start talking. If you don't have an answer to one of these questions, you'll be in trouble. And in the meanwhile, it is still not late till you get that information to build that relation with your team, to be honest, to be transparent, and start talking about, yes, we are all scared, we are all worried, and these are things that could happen. Let's talk about it. Those of you who are getting thoroughly freaked out, let's talk about it. May not be a bad thing to do. Again, remember everything I said about organization culture. Remember what I said about people's personality profiles and the fact that not everyone is going to react the same way. But if you ask me for a formula, build the relationship first, even before you have communication to share. When you share communication, make it as comprehensive as possible. What's going to happen to me? Why me? And what support are you going to get?
Okay. We are continuing with the questions, but like since this is towards the end of the time, I would request that you leave your feedback as well for the session. When would we, another question, when my work in is, just a minute, I'm so sorry. What are some of the communication channels that should be deemed outdated?
um, Sorry, my brain screamed email and I'm shutting my brain down. Sorry, I think email is still very viable. Email is still very critical because it is still a sheet of paper. It's still documented. What is something I've used to use and I'm not using? I think using, this is me, right? I'm finding intranets a struggle to maintain and capture the utilization of. For me, it's either something as documentary driven as an email or something that is current and running. Like I mentioned Slack channels along the way. I mentioned internal messaging boards and so on and so forth. I find them far more useful. I find blogs unreliable. So I wouldn't say outdated, but I find them unreliable because I don't know who reads them. I don't know what they take away. And the comment box is inflammatory. As I said, there are going to be some people who are going to be vociferously speaking up, the wrong leader reads it the wrong time and say, looks like people are reacting, let's shut this down, and it gets messy. So I tend to demote the value of a blog. That's me in my experience at this point in time.
Okay, so how important it is to have a communication plan in place before we move into transformation, as I feel we need to change the plan according to the situation down the line.
Absolutely right. What we work on when we do our change management, when we do the practitioner session, et cetera, is the fact that your comms plan is a dynamic item, right? But the dynamism is on what? The dynamism is probably on the content, the medium, or the frequency. But if you think about the timing and the key messages and the senders, they tend to be nailed down a little earlier. Why should they be nailed down a little earlier? Because our preference is that aligned communication. I would, as an employee, I would like my super duper boss to say the same thing as my own boss is saying. I would like my functions head and that functions head to say the same thing. Otherwise, when me and my colleague meet at the lunch table, or not lunch table, but when we meet on a random chat on a Zoom link, they have heard something different. I've heard something different. So I would like to have alignment as an employee, which means from a transformation perspective, you need to plan that alignment, which means you need to nail down timing. You need to nail down senders, who's going to send what. You need to nail down some key messages upfront. So I guess I'm saying right? It's not this or that. There is some dynamism involved, but not all of it is up in the air. Yes, you're going to revise key elements of it all along the way. Absolutely right.
Okay.
If you notice, sorry, one last observation on that one. Remember that in our cycle, the first thing we started off with awareness. Why do you want me to do this? Why do you want me to read this, and so on and so forth? Awareness is the first one, which means communication is the first step forward. So I would start pretty early, as soon as you have enough information to work with. Suresh, now back to you.
Sure, good one. There is somebody who's saying that my work involves with field staff who are not conditioned to respond promptly. Yep. So how to elevate communication? It's culture trends that affects.
So we often, and again, back to India, right? We have a fair bit of a mixed demographic here. Anytime we are communicating with a large group that is blue collar, pale blue collar, light blue collar, not yet white collar, then white collar, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of gradations. I think the gradations are, again, the current environment, we are seeing more oneness develop. There's far more empathy across the board. Step one, your medium, your route, your voice for the communication, you're best off using organizational hierarchy. You're best off. Communication that comes sidewards, be it a voicemail, be it a message, be it a pamphlet, be it whatever other mechanism we use, doesn't land really well. I have to go layer by layer and get their bosses, their world to talk about it. The second thing that we do is try and be, as you go down the layers, we try to do as much storytelling as possible. More storytelling at the lower levels makes much more sense. They find stories far more reliable. My telling a story that this is what is happening, and when I say story, I mean anecdotes, right? In this unit, we started doing this. This is what the average guy is doing. They were doing this, they are now doing this, and this is how we are helping them. More than 3 pages of an FAQ, this incident, this story, this one image of a person smiling, etc., the reality of what's being done elsewhere lands much, much better. So if I understood the question well, and as you go lower, the thought process lower down the organization is a frontline employee perspective, right? What do you want from me? Have you trained me for it? Are you paying me for it? Are you supporting me for it? Sounds good. That's the first question. Are my colleagues also doing it, right? If you can get these 4-5 questions nailed, and again, as I said, I find anecdotes and stories and examples the best way to do it. You have a game. Sushni, did I answer that question? Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. Going on, while communicating to foreign clients, how to address the communication if we have a time lag which impacts communication and also the expression of the subject matter, as well as there is a language difference.
MARG we're just doing comms, and then we said we need to start working on working with other cultures. You know, we have a large practice on working with other cultures for the same reason you guys pointed out, right? That it's not just a lag of time. It's just it's a perception of time. It's a perception of what work is happening in different parts of the world. It's the different definitions of urgency, and the fact that there isn't one Asia, different countries behave differently. There isn't one Europe, different parts of Europe behave differently. There isn't one US, different parts of the US work differently, right? So there isn't a rule book, and invariably the person we are dealing with is talking through us to us, and we are speaking to them through layers of meaning being distorted. It is Chinese whisper most of the time. So I acknowledge the problem, absolutely right. The way I do it, especially in these times, because you want quick resolution and meaningful stuff, is I no longer I'm sticking to just one route. I do multiple medium at the same time. Okay, so let me take two extreme examples. I'm working with cultures. When I work with cultures that are more process based, let's say the North European cultures, maybe, where I'm more process based, where it's more about free flow of information and unanimity, I'll broadcast. There will be a document, I'll broadcast, I'll keep it short, simple, crisp, and say, here are the 5 things, here's where we are, here's where we're stuck, here's what we're not doing, here's what we're doing, and then quickly follow it up as fast as possible with something like this. But in cultures that are more relationship based, that could be, say, South America, that could be, say, the Mediterranean countries, that could be Middle East, for all you know, that could be to some extent Korea, and so on and so forth. Depending upon those cultures, even Australia for that matter, where relationship makes a difference, I would add that flavor to it. I would reach out to the person and say, hey, I'll leave a voicemail, for example. And voicemail, incidentally, is not outdated. I love voicemails. They sometimes are very, very effective. So I'll leave a verbal message saying, hey, this is what is happening. This is where the challenge is. This is where we are stuck. I've sent you a mail on this. Let's connect back. In cultures which are entirely relationship based, again, Middle East is also an example for that. Some parts of South America are an example for that. But it's entirely relationship based. Then I might just leave a conversation request saying, this is very, very urgent. I need to talk to you, giving you a heads up on something that's happening, and so on and so forth. I would focus on the fact that our relationship is very important, and hence I'm reaching out to you. Sudeshna, did I answer that question? Is there a follow-up question that confirms whether my response made sense?
We don't have any follow-up, so I'm assuming it is answered. So
if that didn't help, please.
Removal of barriers which we were talking about, like if there is a overseas factor involved, so removing all those barriers also comes as a part and parcel of the case, I guess. I think we are almost at the end of time, and this would be the last question we are taking. If any questions are unanswered, then we will just get back to you with those answers. The last one which we are taking is, how is social media going to have its impact on communication?
So, as I said, research is telling us that social media as a mechanism for communication is exceptionally strong. I got my own coaching from in one of the changes that I was working on, where I had someone way younger than me who was into social media tell me, Krish, guess what? In the world outside this organization, I get information unfiltered. No one cares when I get it, and no one is going to, even if it's going to harm me, information comes my way. It's a flood. I step into this organization and everything is cascaded, everything is curated, everything is presented to me at a time of someone else's choosing. How do you want me to trust it? So that was good coaching for me. It made me think differently about social media, and I have my challenges with social media. So where I'm heading with this is, I think social media has already broken the way we communicate. When I say broken, not irretrievably so, but broken to remake it, right? It's changed the perception that you need time to communicate. Now the onus is upon the sender to prove that they couldn't have got back earlier. A. B, it's given a powerful voice to the receiver. The receiver no longer has to be a passive recipient of the message. They have social media in which to raise a concern, a challenge, a disagreement with the message on. So it's changed the dynamic of messaging. It's made it a little more democratic. I have my reservations around it, but I think it's made communication far more powerful. Flip side, it has taken away patience in the receiver's side to understand or invest time into messages. It put pressure on senders to make them as 140 words as possible. That's my thought on social media. It can't be ignored. Whatever you do, you can't ignore it. And that's in context of the fact that organizations have adopting an internal Facebook, an internal mechanism in which they have that speed of communication. Absolutely.
So to add to this again, like, if you can just elaborate on how transparency play a role in communication. Too much information may also be a spoil. No. I guess we've kind of, the Krish's video came out and he's also off. We are towards the end and we didn't have any more questions to take. So I would like to thank everybody for being a part of this webinar and being so engaging. There are very few more questions which are yet to be taken, and we would be kind of sharing those answers separately. The slides shall be shared with all the participants. The slides of the webinar shall be shared with all the participants of the webinar. And in some time, not now, but the webinar shall be posted on our own YouTube channel, but but we are not sending this separately to others. So we have Krish back. So Krish, you can formally say bye. We were saying bye just now. Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciated the questions. The questions made a lot of sense. So transparency is important. I felt guilty that I did not answer that one part. Transparency is critical. It's transparency viewed in the eyes of the receiver. So if you are not sharing all the information, you have a problem. Be careful about curating information. Be very, very careful about this. Thanks for an excellent time. I had a great time. I was a little worried on whether I'm making you guys work very hard on your sheet, but it looks like it's landed well. Best of luck on your communication. Stay healthy.
Goodbye, everybody.